Act 2. Flashback to Interior Coast Guard Cutter Itasca Radio Room. Evening. 3 radio men and Captain Thompson huddle around a receiver in the cramped radio room of the Coast Guard Cutter Itasca. Radio man says,
"Commander, this just in from Honolulu relayed from U.S. Navy radio station at Wailupe. It's parts of a fragmented message received an hour ago.
Super.
K.H.A.Q.Q. 281 North Howland call K.H.A.Q.Q. Beyond North, don't hold with us much longer, above water, shut off."
Commander Thompson, Captain Coast Guard Cutter Itasca, 40, a tall, serious man, listens and ponders the fragmented information. The radiomen wait with bated breath for the captain to interpret the cryptic message. Commander Thompson says,
"They've come down 281 miles north of Howland. I knew it. They must still be afloat at sea. Set course. Full steam ahead. Make haste."
We watch in horror as the Itasca steams to the north of Howland, away from Amelia. The men in the radio room continue to monitor Earhart's 3105 kilocycles voice frequency, hearing only static. Interior Pan American Radio Station, Mokapu Point, Hawaii, evening. As the sun sinks below the horizon and reception conditions improve, the voice was back, very weak and unreadable. The Pan American Airways station on Mokapu Point in Hawaii hears a faint signal on Amelia's daytime frequency. Radio operator says,
"I hear a steady carrier on 3105 kcs. No modulation, very weak. I have a line of bearing, 213 degrees, south, beat. You think it's Amelia's plane?"
The Pan American operator seated to his right responds. Radio operator 2 says,
"If the signals are coming from Earhart, it means that her plane has to be on land. Let's get that bearing to the Navy."
"The Navy? I thought the Coast Guard was leading the search."
"No, it's the Navy. Better send it right away."
Back to present. Exterior Sailor of Fortune ship deck, Panama Canal, day. Sky and her father stand on the deck of the Sailor of Fortune. The sun is warm, and the scenery is beautiful on either side of the Panama Canal. They admire the landscape and reconnect. Bruce shares some history of the construction of the canal, showing off his love of sailing. Sky shares some trivia about Amelia Earhart's first aborted world flight attempt going east to west, showing off her passion for aviation. Sky says,
"Dad, can you believe we're finally here? The Panama Canal. I didn't know the canal passed through an inland lake. It's incredible."
Bruce says,
"This place has some fascinating history. This is a man-made lake, you know? It took a lot of courage and hard work to build this canal."
Sky turns to her father, captivated by his words.
"A man-made lake. It's so beautiful. I never would have guessed. Tell me about it, Dad."
Bruce takes a deep breath and gestures towards the lush rainforest on the canal's banks.
Back in the early 1900s, they dammed the Chagres River to create Gatun Lake. It was a huge part of making the canal possible. You see, the Chagres River was a force of nature. It was tamed and diverted to make a reservoir to control the water flow through the locks. Now, it's one of the largest artificial lakes in the world."
Sky nods, her admiration for her father is evident in her eyes.
"You've sailed in some remarkable places, haven't you, Dad? I'm sorry I've never asked you about your adventures before. Is sailing in the Pacific dangerous?"
No apology necessary, Sky. I've seen the world from the deck of a ship, and there's nothing quite like it. But speaking of adventures, did I ever tell you about the time I sailed through a storm in the Drake Passage?
The Drake Passage.
It's known as one of the most treacherous bodies of water in the world, spanning the distance between South America's Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula. It is one of the world's most challenging maritime passages connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific.
Sky listens intently, ready for her father's sea tales.
"Tell me."
Bruce launches into his seafaring story, Sky hanging on to every word.
"Well, the waves were towering over the ship, and the wind howled like a banshee. The crew and I thought we might not make it. Most of our topside cargo containers were swept into the sea, but after hours of relentless hammering from Triton himself, we emerged from the storm into the arms of the mighty Pacific. That's the thrill of the sea, Sky. You never know what she'll throw at you."
As Bruce finishes his story, Sky's eyes light up, but she's holding back her own excitement.
"That's amazing, Dad. You know, Amelia Earhart was an explorer, too. She faced storms in the sky. Did you know she had a false start in Honolulu during her first east-to-west world flight attempt? It was quite a setback."
Bruce looks at Sky, intrigued.
"Oh? Tell me about it."
"Well, at the beginning of her journey, just after her flight from Oakland, California, her Lockheed Electra suffered significant damage when she struck the runway hard in Honolulu. The left landing gear collapsed as she took off for the next leg of her adventure. It was quite the setback. The plane needed significant repairs. It almost scrubbed all her plans for a world flight, but Amelia, just like you in that storm, never gave up and tried again the following year, this time heading west to east.
Bruce nods, proud of his daughter's passion.
She was a true trailblazer, just like you, Sky. I hope we find her.
They share a moment of connection, the ship moving steadily through the canal. It's clear that the escapade is off to a good start, a father and daughter rekindling their bond amidst the beauty and history of the Panama Canal and the remarkable Gatun Lake, with shared tales of adventure and resilience. Flashback to exterior radio station KGMB, Honolulu, July 4th, night, day 2. The broadcast studio of radio station KGMB in Honolulu buzzes with activity. It's July 4th, 1937, and the clock on the wall reads 8 p.m. The room is dimly lit, with radio operators huddled around their transmit equipment, desperately trying to send instructions to Amelia Earhart's plane. A sense of urgency hangs in the air. On a desk, a sophisticated old-fashioned microphone is placed in front of a then state-of-the-art vintage radio transmitter. A determined KGMB operator, 40, experienced, with headphones on, speaks into the microphone. His professional broadcasting voice flows out over the airwaves. KGMB operator, VO, says,
To Earhart plane, we are using every possible means to establish contact with you. If you hear this broadcast, please come in on 3105 KCS, use the key if possible, otherwise, use voice transmission. If you hear this broadcast, turn the carrier on for 1 minute so we can tune you in, then turn the carrier on and off 4 times, then listen for our acknowledgement at 0645 GCT.
Exterior radio tower, KGMB, night. The radio waves ripple through the night sky, carrying the message across the vast Pacific Ocean. Back to present. Interior Sailor of Fortune crew quarters, Pacific Ocean, day. Sky and her father weather a sea storm in their cabin aboard the salvage ship en route to Gardner Island. The ship rocks and heavy rain is visible through the porthole of their stateroom.
Confined to quarters until the storm passes. This is a lot less glamorous than I envisioned.
Sailing often is. Storms at sea can be unpredictable. They can grow in intensity without warning or vanish in a moment. This one is rough, but nothing the ship can't handle. We'll be fine, Sky.
Thank you for coming, Dad.
Did I have a choice? You were quite persuasive, young lady. Just like your mother. I can't remember ever telling her no.
Grandpa says that, too. Will you tell me, Dad? Tell me how she died.
Sky's father tilts back in the chair. He takes a deep breath. He leans forward and tells the full account of the circumstances of his wife's death.
She knew the aircraft well. It was a 172, the plane she had most of her hours in. This one was equipped with amphibious floats with retractable wheels. They can land on water or on a runway. It was her first flight with pontoons installed, but she was to do some go-arounds and return to the airstrip. It was never the plan for her to make a water landing.
Flashback to exterior lagoon off runway of small airport, 10 years ago, day. Sky's mother is pre-flighting a Cessna 172 equipped with pontoons at a small airport. She checks the main fuel line to complete her pre-flight check. She leaves the engine cowling open to use the restroom before her solo flight. When she returns to climb aboard, she notes that the engine cowling is closed. She cocks her head inquisitively, looks around, shrugs, and latches it. She takes off, and upon climb out, her engine stalls. She steers the gliding plane to a lagoon, where she makes a messy landing, and the plane flips over its nose, coming to rest upside down in the shallow water. A younger version of Rick Haywood, the man now captain of Sky's salvage operation, is the first to arrive on the scene. Back to present. Exterior Pacific Ocean near Hull Island. Morning. The Sailor of Fortune emerges from a fierce storm that has lasted all night. Heavy rain and wind have subsided as the vessel emerges from low sea fog. Captain Rick Haywood stands before the intercom mic on the bridge, his chiseled face illuminated by the dim light of the cabin's monitors and search equipment. Light rain pelts the window. Rick Haywood says,
"Listen up, everyone. The storm's letting up, but it's done a number on our radio equipment. Bruce, meet me on the aft sea deck. For safety regulations, we must stop at Hull Island to transmit our status. After that, we'll head on to Gardner Island."
Exterior The Sailor of Fortune. Aft sea deck. Morning. A small rubber inflatable boat, rib, dinghy is lowered into the churning sea. Sky and her father prepare to board. The rain has subsided, but the air is thick with tension.
Let's make this quick, Sky. I've got a feeling about this place.
They motor to Hull Island and encounter the island manager, 50s, a gruff and weathered individual, who leads them to the radio station. Island manager says,
"That storm's been trouble for all of us. We can only receive messages for now."
Can you fix it?
Skye walks into the radio shack's threshold to peer out around the tiny island as her father converses with the island manager.
It'll take me a day or two to get the parts one need. With the right parts, it shouldn't be hard to get it up and running.
Skye's sharp eyes take in her surroundings and notice a small boat and a pontoon Cessna 172 in Lambrecht Bay. Bruce shakes hands with the island manager and returns to the dinghy with Skye in tow.
Dad, this is where Lieutenant Lambrecht landed his Corsair to ask about Amelia Earhart on the first days of his search about 100 years ago.
Yeah? I bet they had a working radio back then.
Exterior Hull Island. Dock. Night. Skye and Bruce motor back to the Sailor of Fortune in the tiny rib tender. Interior the Sailor of Fortune. Bridge radio console. Night. Rick Haywood observes Skye and Bruce returning in the rib. He examines the radio equipment again and spots a loose or disconnected transmit cable. With a sinister grin, he reconnects it, restoring the transmit functionality.
That should do the trick.
Rick Haywood uses the restored radio to contact the authorities.
This is the Sailor of Fortune. We've weathered the storm. We're currently stationed near Hull Island. The search expedition at Gardner will proceed as planned.
As he finishes his call, he glances out the window and sees the dinghy returning from Hull Island. Unbeknownst to Skye and Bruce, Rick Haywood slowly disconnects the transmit antenna cable once again. We can't imagine why. Exterior the Sailor of Fortune aft loading deck. Day. Skye and Bruce pull up to the ship's low aft deck. Rick Haywood is there to greet them, pulling them back on board with a firm grip on their forearms. As the salvage ship's formidable crane lifts the rib overhead from the sea with ease, Skye and Bruce report to Rick Haywood about the island's inoperable transmitter and pass along the island manager's assurances that he'll restore transmittability within a couple of days.
The island manager promised the radio will be working in a day or two.
He seemed pretty confident he'll have the parts soon.
Rick Haywood, concealing his prior actions, nods and forces a smile.
Good work, you two. I'll have to call in our status later. For now, we'll proceed as planned. Next stop, Gardner Island.
Flashback to Interior Rock Springs, Wyoming. July 3th, 1937. Day 2. 5,000 miles away from the Phoenix Group Islands and the search in the Pacific in Rock Springs, Wyoming, 16-year-old African-American boy Dana Randolph is listening to a commercial radio set that has shortwave bands. The set is connected to a special antenna Dana and his dad had just erected. At about 8 a.m., on the morning of July 4th, while listening at approximately 16,000 kilocycles, he hears a woman say, Amelia, OS, says,
"This is Amelia Earhart, ship on a reef south of the equator, station KJQQ."
The signal then dies away. Dana Randolph says,
Hey Pa, I got Miss Earhart.
Cyrus Randolph says,
Come again.
Cyrus moves closer to the set.
Listen.
"This is Amelia Earhart, ship on a reef south of the equator, station KJQQ."
Oh, we gotta report that.
Do you really think we should, Pa? I mean, she's the most famous white woman in the world. Why should they believe us?
Dana's uncle enters the room. Victor Randolph says,
Everybody wants to know about that. Get downtown and report that.
Dana and his father hop into a Ford pickup truck and hurry to report what he had heard to the local Department of Commerce radio operator at the KDN radio station. The operator realizes that the frequency Dana had been monitoring was most likely 15,525 kilocycles, the fifth harmonic of 3,105. KDN radio operator says,
What frequency did you say you were on? 16,000. If you were on 15,525 kcs, you'd be tuned to a harmonic of Amelia's primary transmit carrier. A freak reception like that is possible. Rare, but possible. We've got to pass this along.
He immediately forwards this information to Washington. Cut to Interior Itasca Radio Room, Pacific Ocean, July 4th, 1937. The next day, a message from U.S. Coast Guard San Francisco Division to Itasca, 23:10 Greenwich Mean Time on July 4th, 1937. We watch Commander Thompson read the message handed to him from his radioman. Commander Thompson says,
Unconfirmed reports from Rock Springs, Wyoming State Earhart plane heard 16,000 kcs reported position on a reef southeast of Howland Island. This information may be authentic as signals from mid-Pacific and Orient often heard inland when not audible on coast. Verification follows.
The radio operators in the hot, cramped radio room wait for the captain to process the new information. They hold their breath, waiting for his orders. Commander Thompson says,
16,000 kcs. It's a hoax. She's down on the water. We know that much. Disregard. Carry on.
The Itasca continues to search in vain in the open ocean northeast of Howland Island. Back to present. Interior Sailor of Fortune ship deck, off Gardner Island, night. The Sailor of Fortune ship rocks gently on the dark, churning waters surrounding Gardner Island. The night sky is overcast, and the air is thick with anticipation. Interior sailor of Fortune ship bridge, night. On board, Sky stands beside her father, both glued to the control room screens displaying the high-definition video feed from a remotely operated underwater vehicle, ROV. The ship's crew members are concentrating on the fine maneuvers of the ROV controls.
I know it's down there. I can feel it. Amelia's plane is down there, intact, waiting to tell her story.
Sky adjusts the contrast of the screen while her father watches, a mix of pride and concern in his eyes. Interior sailor of Fortune ship bridge, night. Continuous. The camera focuses on the salvage ship's radio antenna equipment, battered by the earlier storm. We see a clip of the disconnected transmit antenna cable. Exterior Gardner Island Reef, underwater. Continuous. The ROV descends into the depths, its floodlights cutting through the clear dark water. It navigates through the labyrinthine coral reef, following the path that Sky had laid out for the operators. Exterior ocean floor, underwater. Continuous. The father-daughter duo watches intensely as the ROV reaches the ocean floor, and Sky spots a glimmer of metal buried beneath the sand. She starts to point to the monitor instructing the ROV operators.
There, excavate there.
The arm of the ROV extends, and a blower mechanism clears silt revealing the unmistakable shape of the wheel of a landing gear, sitting on the ocean floor severed from its aircraft.
That's a wheel. A wheel from an airplane landing gear.
Where's the rest of the plane?
The ROV operators begin to zoom in on the artifact.
Wait, stop. Don't zoom in. Zoom out and move backward, slowly.
As the ROV moves backward, the silhouette in darkness beyond the severed landing gear takes shape.
Now, move forward.
There, as if materializing from thin air, Amelia's L-10E Lockheed Electra sits upright on its remaining intact landing gear, intact as if it had landed where it sat, just as Sky had predicted.
Dad, there it is. It's there. We found it. We found Amelia's plane.
Cheers erupt among the crew. Bruce hugs his daughter. Sky says,
I wish Mom was here to see this.
Bruce's smile momentarily turns to a wince, before he smiles again. Soon the work begins to sling lifting straps beneath the vintage aircraft's hull in several locations using the ROV. Interior sailor of Fortune ship bridge, night. The crew members aboard the salvage ship watch in amazement as the ship's deep-sea crane raises a time capsule of history above the surface. The crane positions the aircraft high overhead and begins to lower the Electra onto the deck. Rick Haywood, with a seasoned and weathered grin, rushes over.
Well, I'll be damned. You were right, Sky. It's the Electra.
The crew members guide the relic onto the ship's deck. Exterior sailor of Fortune ship deck, night. Floodlights illuminate the ghostly aircraft. Its untarnished aluminum skin still reflects the light like new in some places. It looks majestic as the crane lowers it onto the ship's deck. Sky and her father, along with Rick Haywood and the crew, stand on the deck in awe of the sight, eager to examine the recovered wreckage.
We need to get word out about this discovery. We'll return to Hull Island. Let's hope their radio transmitter is repaired. The sooner you report your find, the sooner you'll be able to stake your claim.
Sky nods in agreement, her excitement tempered by the responsibility of preserving history.
Indeed. Hull's radio should be operational by now, but first, we need to get some rest.
Exterior sailor of Fortune ship deck, day. The ship is now anchored off of Hull Island again. As before, Sky and her father climb into a small dinghy tethered to the side of the salvage ship. They prepare to motor towards Hull Island, determination in their eyes.
We'll be back in a minute if the radio is still down.
I'm sure they'll have it fixed by now. We'll be tuned into you, so we'll hear if you transmit. If they're still having trouble transmitting, fire this signal to let us know you're on your way back.
Rick Haywood hands Bruce a flare gun.
Go make history. This is your moment, Sky. Go tell the world that the wait is over. Amelia is coming home.
Sky is ecstatic. Her father is as proud can be. Exterior sailor of Fortune ship, continuous. As Sky and her father motor towards the distant Hull Island, another type of grin, a sinister one, forms on Rick Haywood's face. He says to a nearby crewman,
There's no way that radio is fixed yet. Beat, what if we don't tell anyone about the discovery just yet?
The crewman eyes the men in the cowboy hat. Crewman says,
What are you suggesting?
Think about it. We could make a fortune by selling the plane first. Imagine the money we'd make.
The crewman considers the proposition torn between ethics and greed. Rick Haywood doesn't appear to be struggling with the same morality. Exterior dinghy, continuous. As Sky and her father motor closer to Hull Island, they look back at the salvage ship, unaware of the sinister plot unfolding on board. Exterior Hull Island, day. Sky and her father reach the shore of Hull Island. The sole occupant of Hull is nowhere to be found. The island manager's boat is gone. The deep, low roll of thunder can be heard. Bruce enters the radio shack with Sky. After quickly powering the radio and running cursory checks, Bruce determines the radio transmit function is still inoperable. It's useful only for listening. Bruce exits the radio shack with Sky and fires the flare high into the air to let Rick Haywood and the few crewmen of the Sailor of Fortune know that the transmitter is still out. He and Sky will be returning to the boat. Exterior Sailor of Fortune ship. Continuous. The captain sees the flare through binoculars. He puts down the eyewear and gives the order to set a return course. He is leaving without Sky and her father. The ship begins to move away from Hull Island and we get a view of the Electra tied to the deck of the Sailor of Fortune.
Full steam ahead, northeast. Make haste.
Exterior Hull Island. Day. Sky search for the source of the thunder as her father returns to have another go at adjusting the instrument. As Sky scans the horizon, she realizes in disbelief that the salvage ship is disappearing into the distance.
Dad, they're leaving us behind.
No, no, no. That rat bastard. I knew he was a pirate. We need to find a way off this island, Sky. He's got Amelia's plane. Your plane.
As they turn to face the horizon, ominous dark clouds gather in the northeast, and thunder rumbles in the distance. The stakes have been raised, and the race against time to preserve history becomes a battle for survival.